Brad knocked on the door softly. "Room service," he announced, and wiped off the bead of perspiration that had lingered on his forehead. It was his second job that day and he felt tired already. He had been working a lot of part-time jobs because of his girlfriend's upcoming birthday. Linda has been asking for the David Webb emerald and diamond necklace that has recently become popular among the students. It wasn't just the fact that it cost $13,000, but because of its beauty. And Linda had wanted exactly this for her birthday present. And because Brad loved her so much and had even planned their future lives together, he decided to make her happy. Even though he was tired, he wouldn't stop until he had safely secured one of the necklaces for Linda. "Yes, come in," a deep voice muttered from inside. Brad pushed the door open and walked inside. A man was on the bed with legs crossed and the tap in the bathroom was running, which meant that someone else was taking a bath. Brad didn't have the time to look at the man's face before he got to work with the vacuum cleaner. He wasn't supposed to clean while the guest was in any way, but the special guest suddenly requested it. Indeed, the place was messy. "Haha, who do we have here?" The deep voice laughed. "If not Brad." Brad stopped short at this and turned to the speaker. It was Mick, one of his classmates.
Mick, Brad Mutarat."
There was a smug on Mick's face. "Yeah, I found myself one of the campus goddesses," he said interestingly. Brad stiffed unexpectedly, but Mick continued. "She was so wild in bed, and we might go another round." He laughed again. "If only you know how it feels to have one of the campus goddesses," he muttered. Brad felt awkward hearing this and decided to hurry up with the cleaner. He was done in no time. He took the dustbin to empty it, but a used condom dropped from it. He felt disgusted. Mick was right. Perhaps the campus goddess was the one taking a shower in the bathroom. At this time, the door of the bathroom opened and a girl walked out of it. "Hello, pretty. You took a while in the bathroom," he said smugly. I would like us to have another nice time." "Come on, Mick," the girl whispered. "The cleaner is here," she stated as a matter of fact. Brad stopped suddenly at the tone he heard. Before he could even stop himself, he turned to look at them. His eyes went wide with shock as he stared at Linda, his girlfriend. Blood drained from his face. Linda looked at Brad with a frown. "Brad, why are you here?" she asked with surprise. Brad huffed. "Why am I here? I think I should ask you this question." He responded in a voice fueled with anger and incredibility. Mick had made a huge delight in telling him that he met one of the campus goddesses. Though Linda's beauty was unraveled, he hadn't imagined it could be her. "Linda, do you know this pathetic fool?"
Mick spoke arrogantly.
Linda nodded slightly and turned to look at Brad again. Since her boyfriend had already discovered her betrayal, there was no point in trying to hide it now. "Brad, we need to break up," she announced coldly. Brad couldn't believe his ears. He stared at Linda with eyes gone gobsmacked. "Break up? Linda, we've been together for 2 years. Why are you breaking up with me now?" "We need to go our separate ways," she said with resentment. Pain rushed into Brad like knives. "Oh," Mick laughed. "What could a campus goddess like you have seen in a fool like Brad? He obviously has no money to handle a beauty like you." Linda blushed slightly, soon regaining herself. "That was why I left him actually," she muttered, staring directly at Brad. "You don't have money and you are barely able to afford the cheapest thing in life. This isn't the life I bargained for. I'm too good to live in poverty." She hugged Mick so tightly around his neck, with a smug smile. "Mick is my boyfriend now. I don't want to have anything to do with you ever again." Brad looked at Mick, with anger in his eyes. "You could have any girl on this campus. Why must it be my girl?" he yelled. Linda felt annoyed at his words. It was her decision after all. "And what are you going to do about it?" Mick said with indifference in his voice. He held his arm over Linda's waist and pulled her even closer to himself. "I had a nice time with your girlfriend, and so what?" Brad felt his world shattered. For 2 years that he had been dating Linda, she had never allowed him to touch her, and he thought she was a virgin. He didn't believe so much was happening. Linda laughed shyly, not bothered by what Mick had said. "You should leave, Brad, unless you are going to watch what we are going to do next. Get out." "Brad, Mick ordered. Before I get upset. Brad ignored him and turned to look at Linda. What have I done to deserve this, Linda? We were doing fine. We were not, Brad. We never did. You didn't even have the money to take care of me. When I asked you for a phone, it took you a year to get it for me. Exactly. And I got her the latest one in a day. Mick boasted. Do you really think you can take care of one of the campus goddesses? You really have a high dream, he mocked.
Meek.
Shut up. Brad yelled in anger and took a step forward, with his clenched fist. Linda stepped in front of him. Leave Brad, she ordered. Brad took in several breaths before he managed to turn around and walked out of the room. He hesitated behind the door as he heard Linda giggle from within. They continued to have fun as if nothing had happened. He couldn't believe that the lady he was planning on settling with could do something of such to him. Brad walked out of the hotel, his zeal to work totally drained down. He had never felt so heartbroken. It was raining now, but Brad stepped out anyway. The rain beat down on Brad, making him feel more miserable than he was. His phone beeped suddenly, its vibration jerking Brad out of his thoughts. He hesitated before he took the phone. It was still raining, but Brad couldn't care less as he read through the message. Hello, Master. You have been accepted back into the family, and you are currently the heir of Harris. If not for the message that Brad had received, he wouldn't have remembered that he was from a wealthy family. The Harris family is one of the top 3 most wealthiest families in the city. For 5 years, his family had been assessing him until they were satisfied that he had met with their condition. His properties and money were withheld. But apparently the bad days are now over. Everything that belongs to him can now be claimed by him. Finally he got his money back. Now he could go to the bank, withdraw some money to pay his debt. He used to spend a lot on his ex. But what did he get? A big debt and her betrayal. Thinking of this, Brad made a wry smile and flagged down a taxi. The taxi stopped in front of the largest bank in the city, the Trust Financial Bank. Various expensive cars were parked around the bank. The people walking in and out of the bank were richly and nicely dressed. He pushed the door open and walked inside. Ouch! A soft voice groaned from inside. It looks like the door could be opened from both sides, and Brad had been careless when he opened it. So, the door had bumped into a short-haired lady who was heading out of the bank. I'm sorry, Brad apologized quickly. What? You must be kidding me. The lady glared at him. Is this like your first time here that you didn't know that the door could be opened from both sides? The bank assistant manager, Claire, who had seen the commotion, moved closer. She examined the lady first and turned to look at Brad with disapproval. She mentally examined Brad, noting darkly his wet and dirty clothes. Trust Financial was different from other banks as their clientele was exclusively high-end people. The bank assistant manager knew that the lady came with her mother, and she knew how wealthy her mother was, but she had never seen Brad before. And judging by his appearance, he wasn't the type of customer that they do get. What can I help you with, sir? Claire asked with a forced smile. I'm here to withdraw, Brad responded. Claire gathered her brows. To withdraw money? She was a bit shocked, her eyes running over him again. Do you have a card, perhaps? She asked with disgust. Brad didn't look at all like someone who could even afford a card at Trust Financial. To get a card at Trust Financial, the members must have at least $2 million in savings, and the man in front of her looked very poor in his demeanor and clothing. Perhaps he thought he could use other bank cards at Trust Financial Bank.
No, Brad answered honestly.
The lady that has been observing what was happening with keen interest released a sigh. She realized she was worrying just for nothing. Let's go, her mother said suddenly, joining them with some documents in her hands. Claire bowed slightly. Thank you for coming, Mrs. Davies, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you, the lady smiled while her mother nodded once. Just make sure you keep people like this off. They could damage the bank's reputation, she muttered, her remark directed at Brad. Claire nodded a gratitude and followed them out of the bank. She watched their car drive off before she stepped right back inside the lobby, only to discover that Brad was gone. Her gaze searched around in frustration. Where could he have gone to? Could he have been ashamed and walked away? Just as she turned to return to her desk, she caught a glimpse of a young man walking towards the VIP room. At once, she realized it was the young man from earlier. Brad had agreed that he didn't even have a card. How then could he be wandering off to the VIP room? Customers who are eligible to be called the VIP in Trust Financial must have at least $20 million. Claire knew that she would be in trouble if someone like Brad was actually caught sneaking inside. So, she decided to stop him by screaming for him to stop. "Hey, wait!" she further yelled as she hurried after him. Brad didn't answer. "Hey, stop! Come back!" Claire yelled in frustration. But it was too late as Brad walked past the lounge, opened the door, and stepped inside the VIP room. Claire pulled at the door with desperation, but it turned out that the door had been locked from behind. She felt a stab of annoyance at this, especially at the fact that people were already focusing on her. She smiled apologetically to them, bearing in mind that she was going to stay at the door for Brad. Meanwhile, in the VIP room, Philip sat comfortably on the sofa, sipping his coffee slowly when the door opened suddenly. He sat up quickly, though he hadn't expected any visitors because Claire always informed him earlier. As a customer manager, he was responsible for more than 40 VIP customers, and he knew them so well. He stood up, unconsciously straightening his suit. He looked at Brad, and his countenance dropped. The man in front of him wasn't his regular customer, and he was certain that he wasn't close to them either. Besides, he wasn't dressed as someone who was authorized to enter the VIP section. "Who are you, and have you lost your way?" "This is the VIP section," he said as a matter of fact. "Well, I want to get my money." Brad went straight to the point. Philip eyed Brad suspiciously. Brad seemed like someone that knew what he was doing. But even at that, he suspected that he must not have been aware that certain criteria had to be met before he could be a VIP. "Do you have a card, sir?" "No," Brad said honestly. Philip released a sigh. He was glad that he was right after all. He just wondered why Claire let him in. "I am sorry, but we don't give out money without a card." "Well, you have fingerprint recognition here, don't you?" The fingerprint ID system in the bank was for the wealthiest family and business people. To qualify, the user must have nothing less than $80 million. So only a few had their fingerprints recorded in the system. Philip scoffed. "Yes, you want to use it?" "Yes." Brad nodded once. Philip felt triggered. How could someone who doesn't even have a card want to use fingerprint recognition? After much consideration, he decided to give Brad a chance. He moved to the safe and pulled out the fingerprint device. "Place your thumb here," Philip muttered and gestured at the surface. Brad placed his thumb on the sensor. Beep! The device lit up with a red light and the screen displayed the word, "Fingerprint not recorder." At this, Philip's expression turned sour. He turned to look at Brad. "What is the meaning of this?" He glares at him. A flash of awareness flickered across Brad's face. "Wait,
I'm sorry.
that was definitely not the right finger. I will use the thumb next," he muttered. Philip felt a stab of annoyance at his words. "What? Is this a joke? What is your plan here? And if your thumb doesn't work, you try your pinky finger. And if it still doesn't work, will you try with your toes then?" He said with a wry smile and picked up his phone to call the police. But Brad had already placed his thumb on the fingerprint sensor. The police had picked it up when a green light appeared on the device and new details flashed up on the screen. Verification successful. Family account 01. Verifier Harrier Brad Liam. Account 02413. Philip gaped at Brad in disbelief. Shock kept him motionless and speechless for a moment, but he was quick to put on a smile. Who would have thought that the young man in front of him could truly have fingerprint recognition in that kind of prestige bank? "Mr. Harrier, I'm so sorry I didn't recognize you earlier. I'm Philip McClellan, the customer manager for this branch. Please, allow me to assist you," he said with a nice smile and a great show of respect. If a man like Brad slipped out of Trust Financial, it would really hurt him. Besides, he would be sanctioned by the authorities. He had to get on Brad's good side. "It's all right," Brad said casually. "Can I know the amount I have left in my account?" "Sure," Philip responded quickly. "Please, have your seat while I do just that." He indicated to the plum chair in front of him. Brad sat. Philip sat in front of the computer and typed for a few minutes. On his instructions, Brad provided more fingerprint scans for authorization. "It's done, Mr. Harrier," Philip said suddenly, and Brad went to sit. He clicked on the OK button and Brad's account details appeared in front of him. Philip pointed to the screen and said, "Mr. Harrier, your account balance is currently $99 billion, he announced. Philip sucked in a breath as the numbers left his mouth. The young man had an enormous fortune. It placed him in the top flight of 1%. A lot of people wouldn't be able to dream of such money, and Philip couldn't believe that the young man in front of him possessed it. Brad felt strange as he stared at the numbers on the numbers. The last time he checked, he barely made it past some $1 million. How come it was almost entering $1 zillion? "Oh, you have other assets too," Philip said, suddenly cutting through Brad's thoughts. "Let me show you that, sir," he muttered. Clicked through several pages on the screen and finally clicked on the OK button again. The screen displayed a 44 grid. "The surveillance screen displays all the physical assets that you own elsewhere," Philip explained. He clicked on the upper right side of the corner and brought up a feed from the other branches of the bank. The first feed revealed a sports car. On the other side was the Bugatti La Voiture Noire. Philip opened up the screen one after the other. La Peregrina Pearl is displayed on one side and 6 stacks of gold bars are displayed on the other side. Philip's air became caught in his throat. La Peregrina was currently the most expensive pearl in the world, auctioned last at $11.8 million. The feed from another branch revealed 2 original Picasso paintings and Rodin statues. Another branch feed displayed 5 18-karat gold, 20 10-karat diamonds, 15 pieces of ivory, and another couple of stacks of gold. Philip's eyes went wide with shock as he stared at Brad's asset. He had never seen someone as rich as Brad. "All right, I would like a card," Brad said quickly. "Yes, sir," Philip said with a little bow. "I will start with that immediately. Would you like to have coffee before I finish? I could order whatever you would like to have." Philip wanted to get on Brad's good side. "Oh no," Brad made a wave of his hand. "I'm fine." Philip went on with it, and within 15 minutes, a Supreme card was produced. Philip looked at the Supreme card and thought about Brad's asset. The card wasn't at all good enough for Brad's standard, but it was the highest card they were authorized to issue at Trust Financial. If there was another high card, he would have issued it instead. "Mr. Harrier, here's your card, sir," he announced and stretched out the card to Brad. It was a black card. "Thank you," Brad muttered, stood up, and walked towards the door. On second thought, Philip wanted to walk him out. There was no way he would be ignoring such an important figure, but he couldn't do so as the asset checking system on his computer had not been turned off. That aside, the fingerprint verification machine, iris recognition apparatus, and other sensitive equipment have not been returned to the safe. Claire was anxiously and curiously waiting in the hall for Brad. She wondered what had happened and what was taking Brad so long to get out. Could Brad have killed the customs manager? The more she considered it, the more scared she became. She was already debating on banging on the door when Brad walked out confidently. "Hey!" she yelled, attracting attention to herself again as she moved closer to Brad. "You can't leave. You broke into the VIP room." She assaulted him. 2 security guards walked closer. She had already called them and told them to be on standby. "Once we confirm that nothing is missing, we will have the police arrest you for questioning." "What are you doing?" Brad questioned with confusion written all over him. The 2 security guards joined her, and the Supreme card was fished out of his pocket. "Oh wow!" Her eyes sparked up as if she had found evidence of his guilt. She took the card from one of the security guards. "You stole a card. A Supreme card at that. That's it. I am calling the police." It didn't even cross Claire's mind that Brad could be the owner. She imagined that he entered the VIP room and pretended it to be a mistake. The custom manager must have stepped out when she also followed the customer out the other time. Maybe that was how he was able to steal the card. "Let go," Brad muttered. He was sick of the woman already. Claire huffed. "You don't even feel guilty. You are going to rot in jail." she said with determination and turned towards the security guards. Keep him on hold while I call the police. Their actions have attracted a lot of attention now. People turned to look at Brad with scorn. Just then, Philip, who had finished tidying up the room, strode out of the VIP room. He was in a hurry to meet up with Brad. Perhaps he would still be able to walk him out. Having seen Brad's assets and his account balance, Philip was convinced that Brad was the most important customer that Trust Financial Bank had ever had at the moment. He has also discovered that the system listed Brad's account as just one of his multiple accounts attached to a family group labeled 01. If a single account holds so much, he then wondered how much would be in the family account. It was rare to meet such an important personality, and if they got along very well, it would be a great success for Philip, so he knew what he was really supposed to do. When he saw Claire struggling with Brad, a surge of anger rushed through him. With the look of things, Brad was about to get angry as well, and if that happens, Philip didn't know what might happen. Claire was a fool who was playing with fire, and she might drag Philip down with her. And he wasn't going to let that happen. A word from Brad is all that he needed for him to end both their careers. What is going on here? He boomed, stepping into their midst. The security guards who were about to manhandle Brad pulled back at Philip's order. Claire's eyes flashed with excitement as she raised the supreme black card in the air. Mr. McClellan, thank God you are here. She released a sigh of relief. This man over here stole a supreme card from the VIP room. She accused him with pride all over her face. She was sure that Philip would be proud of her for it. If that could happen, she might just look forward to future recommendations since Mr. McClellan had a lot of authority in their branch. She looked at Brad. Now you are done for. Let's see how you will escape this. She snapped with a little smug on her face. Mr. McClellan's expression has always been dark, but Claire watched as it got even darker by the seconds. Let go of him this instant, he roared, shocking everyone including Claire, who was stunned and unable to speak for a moment. The authority in his voice was the only thing that pulled Claire's back. Mr. McClellan had never yelled at her like that before, and she wondered why he would side with a thief like Brad. But sir, Claire started again. He stole. Hand over the card, Philip said coldly, cutting through her words. Claire was scared now. She didn't say anything and merely stretched out the supreme card to Philip. Philip took it and moved closer to Brad, with a little bow of his head. I'm so sorry, Mr. Harrier. This is all my fault. I didn't train Claire properly. I apologize, and here's your card. Philip spoke with a mixed expression. The bank would lose a very important customer if Brad decided to pull back. If he couldn't keep such a client, he would be damned. Everyone was stunned by the respect that Philip was giving Brad. At this point, Claire could not but wonder if the supreme card really does belong to Brad. Yet, it still doesn't make any sense to her. If the supreme card really does belong to Brad, then he should have at least $50 million in his account. But Brad barely looks past 20. He wasn't even richly dressed. It's all right, Mr. McClellan, Brad responded and took the card. Thank you so much, Mr. Harrier, Philip muttered, with a little bow before he turned to look at Claire again, with a cold demeanor. What are you still doing? Apologize to Mr. McClellan now, he thundered. Philip was baffled. How could Claire still not understand how important Brad was and the quantity of respect he had to receive? Claire went numb for a moment. She immediately bowed. I'm so sorry, Mr. Harrier. I apologize for the inconvenience. I made a mistake and I hope you forgive me for it. Brad shook his head briefly, unwilling to press more on it. Instead, he proceeded towards the door. Mr. Harrier, Philip called quickly, stopping Brad in his tracks. If there's any help you want me to render, I will gladly do so, he promised. Brad gave him a faint smile. All right, Philip, he muttered and walked out of the bank. Philip had come to his defense after all. Philip felt emotional at the fact that the richest client at Trust Financial called him by his first name. But for Claire, she couldn't help but imagine how much money Brad really had in his account that could have made him refer to Mr. McClellan by his first name, and Mr. McClellan wasn't even bothered by it. Instead, there was a huge smile plastered on his face. Who was the man? Brad's phone rang as he stepped out of the bank. It was an unknown caller. He picked it up anyway. Hello. Hello. This should be Brad, right? Brad nodded once and remembered that the caller couldn't even see his face. Yes. Who is this? I'm calling from Miller May Jeweler. Brad remembered instantly. He had been saving for David Webb Emerald. Fortunately for him, he was able to secure an ally at Miller May Jeweler. You have to come here very fast if you still want the David Webb Emerald. I overheard one of the salespeople discussing that a new buyer was on the way. And mind I tell you that there's only one David Webb in Miller May currently. So, hurry up, she muttered and hung up. Brad hesitated and thought of what to do. He didn't need David Webb anymore since Linda had broken up with him.